Guys, let's start again, please.
Are you ready? I'm not. So, I have no mic, so this is, I will try to speak louder, but I probably can't. So, I was supposed to have some slides. Actually, I have them, but for some reason, I'm not going to use that. So you're going to experience what I experience in these talks. This talk is called, I called it at least, Screen Reader Internals, a crash course on accessibility for the fearless. And I mean a crash course in the sense you'll be crushed, in the sense that you'll be crushed, because this is madness. Trust me, screen readers are probably the most craziest software or kinds of software I've worked on and I've worked with. Why? You will see. But before that, about me, I'm Rui Batista, I'm 31. More about me. I'm a software engineer, now I work for BarcampLX, the former Daimler Trucks and Buses data hub here in Lisbon. Most of you probably know me, or the ones that know me for working on Engineer. I don't work there anymore. I'm working for BarcampLX. If you want to work with trucks and Lego trucks, give me a shout. More about me. I don't know. I mean, I'm an accessibility consultant by design, I guess. More. You can reach me on Twitter at RAGB or personally. And this dog is called Godiva for your information. So, firstly and foremost, what's the goal of this talk? I will try to give you the perspective of accessibility from the user side, the user of accessibility, not the developer side. What's probably different about this talk is I'm a developer and I'm a user, so I kind of have sort of a unique perspective on this sort of topic. This will be kind of fairly technical in some points, and I need your help in the sense that I'll need you to talk or to answer some questions, please. First and foremost, what is accessibility? Any hints? Any ideas? You can raise your hand. It doesn't work, but you can.
I'm raising mine.
That's fine, that's fine. Any hints?
It's making sure that the software you're using can be used by everyone.
And anytime.
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. Any more information, any more definitions?
I'm very impressed. How were you able to have such a knowledge during your youth? How were you learning what you know and having the opportunity to be like you are?
First and foremost, luck. But I will explain to you in the end of this talk how I personally work and what I personally do. Okay? I will answer that. It's easier because I want to really talk about that part, actually. Okay, accessibility, I think it makes sense. Sophia, you kind of cheated on that. But yeah, it's making sure that everyone, regardless of ability or disability or situation even, can access any kind of software or tool. It's about kind of a universal design. And it's not about UX or UI design, but if properly done, it's about UX, actually. User experience is an experience, proper experience. I mean, for accessibility, there are two main kinds of accessibility tools or accessibility, say, ways, direct and indirect. And direct means an application or some hardware has its own tools for, say, for instance, self-voicing app or software or hardware, like the ATM machines, for instance, when they talk, at least. And indirect accessibility could be screen reader software that reads other applications or magnifiers or switch devices like Stephen Hawking used, or you name it. There are lots of tools for that. But screen readers, magnifiers, and so on are probably the most common ones. So you don't have to do any direct support for accessibility on your applications per se. You want to do something, but I'll show. I mean, why it's accessibility important? Any ideas? Why it's relevant? Why it's important?
Because you want to make sure everybody can use your product.
Why?
Because you want to reach as many people as possible.
Even for money, right?
Yeah.
That's fine. That's the point. And because it's the right thing to do. I mean, depends on the definition of right, but I think most of you will agree that's the right thing to do, making sure everyone can or may access your product or application or software. And it means inclusion, and it means equal opportunities for everyone. And I mean, it means jobs. I can tell you from my personal experience, if some tool is not accessible and some business uses that tool, the odds of hiring me low, you know. It's a fact. It's not a, you know, kind of a theoretical say, idea. So about screen readers, what do you think a screen reader does in the end?
It reads screens.
That's yes. More. What does it do more?
I mean, I guess it presents the information on the screen via sound, basically.
It presents.
I'm not sure how the wording works.
It can present information on the screen in a kind of semantically relevant way, not just what it is on the screen, but what that, say, text inside of a square is, which probably is a button. And it can present it by sound or text-to-speech, sound icons. I mean, some words can be, or some information can be a sound for faster, say, interaction. It could be on Braille with Braille displays. I actually don't have any. I have one in my bag. I can show you in the end. And it does more. It allows you to not just present what it's on the screen, but allows the user to navigate there and to query specifically what's on the screen without, you know, the application or the operating system doing anything for that. I mean, it presents tools and ways to explore what's on the screen, not just reads, in the sense that something changed, it reads. It's not just that. It presents ways of interacting, navigating, exploring, I mean, querying, whatever you want. Screen readers can exist in kind of two main forms, like command line interfaces, which probably are not as used anymore, like for MS-DOS, Linux terminals, and so on. It's an hook on terminals and reads stuff there. It's nothing special. And there are graphical screen readers used on Windows, Mac OS, Linux desktops, and mobile phones, like this one here. You probably have that one on your phone, and even Androids. It speaks very fast, actually. I mean, and the graphical screen readers are probably the ones we should care much about. There are a couple of examples. Windows, you have NVDA, which I worked on a couple of years ago. In macOS, you have VoiceOver, which is actually also on iOS and the mobile offerings of Apple. Android, you have TalkBack. You can activate on your phones to annoy your friends. Sophia, you did that. I know. I mean, you have Orca for Linux. You have a couple of them. Do you have any idea how a screen reader reads what's on the screen? How does it do that? Any hints? That's bad, but that's why I'm here. So, a screen reader is say, imagine on Windows or Mac OS, to simplify, it's a process running on your machine. Actually, in Mac OS, for instance, VoiceOver is part of the operating system. But it's a process. It's running. It hooks on the keyboards, so it can process keys and, you know, change a bit the navigation style and, you know, hook on some events on the user side. But what it does, it queries applications for their hierarchy of objects. Say a window has text and buttons and menus and so on. I mean, there is a very important concept on accessibility, which is hierarchies. And screen readers usually navigate through those hierarchies or trees or whatever you want to call them. And the screen reader just do basically that and queries for, in an hierarchy, what, say, that window is, and the thing says it's a window, and the title is something, and the children are this menu with role of menu, and a couple of submenus and menu items and so on and so forth, and there's some buttons, and a button says, I'm a button, my role is button, and a text box says, I'm a text box, my role is text box, and I have this content there, and the cursor is on that position, and if you want text change notifications, please register with this callback. So there is an accessibility API on most operating systems that you can, from a screen reader perspective, can ask and register stuff to be notified on. Do you imagine or envision any other scenario for the usage of this accessibility API further from screen readers or assistive technologies? Can you imagine another nice scenario for this? Yes, Sophia. Can you imagine, Sophia, or QA people?
Test automation?
Yes, test automation. You can use accessibility APIs for test automation, interface test automation. It's pretty. Actually, the interface on Linux, which is AT-ASPI, you can find it on GNOME and Qt, was actually created for that purpose in the first place. So basically what the screen reader does or should do is to create accessibility APIs and providing tools for a user to navigate those tools and be notified and transform that information in speech or braille or, whatever you want. But there is a problem there. What if some application doesn't implement accessibility APIs? And that can happen because, usually I'd say Mac OS or Windows, native controls already implement those features. But these days, you want to do your shiny web application to run on every platform and waste all of your memory like Slack, or you want to do something different because you are better designer than the other guys, and you just invent your own select box, but you don't implement any accessibility support there. What do you think that happens there?
Screen reader won't be able to detect what that's supposed to
Yes, that's a fact. And imagine in some applications like Microsoft Office, which don't implement parts of the accessibility API for reasons, and everyone needs to, use that. What can you do about if you don't have accessibility support? So probably what we do, and I actually worked on that a couple of years ago, was using COM application model, the one we use for macros, for instance, to get information to add to the screen reader. And I'm telling you about stuff like COM, Windows kernel messages. If anyone did any Windows API development, you know what's the messy thing there. It was really hacking, proper hacking there. But it's not just there. It's not just that. Imagine that you don't have any COM interface or interprocess way of communicating to some process, and the process doesn't expose any specific API like Office does. What can you do about that? You can go even deeper. You can install a video driver, a custom video driver, hook on the graphics that are rendered on the screen, and try to do what's called an off-screen model, and try to make sense of that and present to the screen, to the blind user, that in a semantically sensible way, which is a mess. But before 2000 or 2002, that's what every screen reader did. So basically, a screen reader was a virus, actually, because, it took upon, for privacy reasons, I think no one does that anymore, but it's still possible to do in some Windows parts with GDI and a couple of old APIs. I think in Mac it's not possible, in Linux probably possible but not desirable. Still, it was a mess. Specifically about browsers and web applications. And I think that's the part of accessibility that most people know about, like web accessibility, how to do accessible web pages and so on and so forth. you can read standards. They are pretty good, and there is this saying that they are pretty good because there are many. You can read those. But I'm not talking about standards here. I think they serve their purpose. But what you need to know about when doing an accessibility web page or accessible web page or a web application, there are rules to do that, but my advice, even for desktop, use native controls. Again, don't reinvent the wheel, or in the web use already existing frameworks. For instance, Bootstrap does many accessible stuff out of the box, I guess, if I'm not mistaken. There are others. I don't remember any of that anymore because I'm not a front-end developer. I did it, but it's not advisable. It worked, I know. But yeah, it's not advisable. What's the problem on web accessibility on the screen reader's perspective, and even on the web designer or front-end developer sides? In the common desktop application, you have a couple of variables, like screen reader can change, and the way the information is presented can change. The OS can change, so the accessibility APIs can change. They are different from different OSs. And one question that people make is, why can't you have the same screen reader for different operating systems? It's not possible. I mean, they are so different that it's impossible to do that. It's too many abstraction levels. I mean, but when you enter the realm of web, you have two more variables. I mean, you have screen reader, OS, you have the web browser, and different browsers behave, especially Internet Explorer. And you have the web page. So you have kind of 4 or 5 things that can vary there. The only thing you can control as a developer, as a web developer, is the HTML, the CSS, the JavaScript. So I mean, it's not feasible to do it perfectly. But what I advise is to really try to test your apps or web pages with a screen reader. You wouldn't have the same experience as a daily user of those technologies, of course, because you are not the user, but you can make sense of that. And if your keyboard navigation works, if the semantically correct HTML, and if you use ARIA, you shouldn't have to. ARIA is the thing that you can expose custom controls on the web for accessible technologies. ARIA stands for Accessible Rich Internet Applications, I guess. You shouldn't have to use that because you should use native controls, but you should if you want to do custom things because you are a bad person and a good web designer. You can use ARIA and expose information for accessibility. Assistive technologies there. So, how much time do I have?
3 minutes.
Okay. Things you do to make my life miserable as developers. CAPTCHAs. This is not about screen readers, but I mean, you know what CAPTCHA is? That thing with audio or an image to write some letters that are obfuscated and so on. Please don't do that. I mean, I'm not a robot. I have to pick those checkboxes from Google saying I'm not a robot, and I can do that. But the ones with pictures, I mean, please. Yes, I'm a robot, but no one needs to know. I mean, other things, all over again, don't use custom controls. Use the native things. Use proper tools to develop interfaces, say for desktop and for the web, like Xcode has accessibility tools to help you. Visual Studio has those. I mean, for the web, you have a couple of things. Don't make screen reader implementers, don't make them use specific APIs or off-screen models or any other hack, because it's a mess. I mean, it's a mess. Regarding the other question, how I did my journey, I did my journey with this kind of stuff, screen readers. I mean, why do I know about screen readers? Because I worked on them, because I had to change them for my purposes, actually. By the way, screen readers, if you are curious about that, most of the implementations are done in Python and C and C++ for the performance heavy performance code and low-level code. But I mean, I don't know why, but Python is a very common choice for this kind of software. And I mean, I use screen readers and other accessibility tools to do my job. I probably had some luck and some help from my parents, my friends, some of them are here. Yeah, I mean, it's that. Please, do you have any questions more? You can make them, I mean.
Everybody's raising arms.
That's fine.
Besides screen readers, what do you think about the evaluation tools, the accessibility evaluation tools?
That's an interesting question. I mean, those can evaluate. You can see that as in a statically typed language, you have a compiler. I mean, it validates that your code makes sense for the computer. It doesn't validate that your code does what you intend to do. But it's a very interesting start. Still, you need to write tests. And accessibility means probably manual testing. Okay? That's the analogy I can make. But they are important, yes. They can find you a couple of errors, or most of them, but in the end, you need to validate if it makes sense. Because you can have a perfectly validating web page or web app, and some blind user can't use that. So imagine that you write the same description for all images. It validates, it passes, for instance, but it doesn't make sense. Any more questions? Okay. Thank you.